Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind of reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is George Ortega. I'm here with Claudia Basson, and we're here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Today we're going to be talking about happiness, art, and the artist. And we have a very special guest with us. Louise Stern is a printer and a painter and a printmaker in Westchester County, New York. Her work is in various private and corporate collections like General Foods and ABC TV, and Louise is listed in Who's Who in American Art. Welcome to the show, Louise.
Thank you.
Great. All right,
nice to be here.
Thank you. Okay, let's start off with how is art about happiness? How, yeah.
I think it's all absorbing. When you're creating, you don't think of anything else. All other thoughts are pushed out of your mind.
Right, and like so can you explain the process a bit? Like, let's say you're starting a new painting. You know, what are the process, the parts of the process that really create that joy?
If I'm starting a new painting, I have to plan it ahead. Planning is very important. As a matter of fact, when I do my monoprints, I start it with the design, which I cut out or tear apart from the newspaper. And I run that through the press, and after I saturate it with a solution that will transfer the image to a piece of paper, and that's my starting point. Then from there I go in all different directions.
Great. So I guess initially the joy, the pleasure of art has, I suppose, a lot to do with imagination and inspiration, just conceiving of the idea. And then I guess eventually it turns to kind of like the more logistical, technical issues, right? Just how to translate that vision to the canvas, to the paper.
It's really a combination of both. You have the idea first, and then you execute the idea according to your own guidelines. And your technique is very important at that point, to convey what you want to convey.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with the aspect of when you mentioned that you lose yourself, in the process.
Yes.
That you actually, separate from, maybe really separate from a lot of the cognition, and it's mostly creative energy.
It is creative energy, and you are separated from all the troubles and all the big responsibilities you have at other times.
So what must that be like? I mean, since this is the happiness show, that must be an
I think that's very important.
Talk about that experience a little bit for you.
Well, I think when I'm creating, I'm very happy. And not that I'm not happy at other times too, but not always. Nobody can be happy all the time, I don't think. And then happiness is relative. What is one person's conception of happiness is certainly not another's. But I find it in art very much. I started in about what was it? A long time ago.
19-something.
Yeah, 1900, yes. Let's see, in the 40s, I guess.
Okay.
So I've been doing it a long time. But
the 40s. Wow, what was going on then?
The 40s, was it the 40s? And I started at the Museum of Modern Art. They had a wonderful course there. Given by a teacher by the name of Don Stacy, who was very creative, and I got hooked on it right from the start, and he helped me. I was thinking of I was at that time a musician, and he convinced me to switch to art because it fit in with my family life much better, and I loved it so right from the start.
That is so fascinating, because here she is already gifted. And somebody changes gears for you, and you still continue to be gifted and talented, and the ideas still flow. And and it didn't stunt you at all. I mean, you went from being, what type, did you play an instrument?
Yes, well, and I sang.
And you sang.
I used to sing with Robert Shaw's Collegiate Chorale. And so I was pretty good at that point, but it didn't fit in as well as art. We had a lot of problems with our family and so forth, and this was much better for me. And it wasn't too hard to switch. I loved it. Right from the start, I loved it.
Wow.
So it's been great, and I continue. I think when I started, I never dreamed that it would come to this, I would develop to this point, but it has. So I'm very happy about that.
She's happy about that.
Absolutely. Can you explain, like, you know, there is a certain kind of a happiness that comes, like, you're an established artist, you know your media, you know the process, and I think that brings a certain kind of joy. But when you were just learning art, when you were transitioning from music to being an artist, it was all new for you. So what is kind of, can you kind of like remember and relate the joy of learning art, of you know, just like having it open up to you as a new experience, and just learning the various principles and techniques of art?
Well, I think I was very fortunate because I learned the techniques after I created, and I think that keeps you very free, and you're not as inhibited as you would be the other way around, such as artists. Some of my teachers drew from casts for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and that was very inhibiting, and they could never achieve the same kind of freedom that, for instance, I have or have had during the years, because I didn't learn that way. I learned the techniques after I learned to just express myself very freely. And I did that at the Museum of Modern Art. Yes, that's where I started.
And that's where you started. So do you recommend approaching your art that way?
Yes, I certainly do, and I teach that way too. I don't make people copy a still life or stick to any particular regime. They just express themselves.
Wonderful.
And with an idea, and then they learn the techniques as they go along.
Well, that's like what art therapy is, really, expression through art.
I suppose so, yes, yes. Well, I never studied art therapy, but that is just what I do.
But it comes naturally to you.
It comes naturally, yeah. So that's been a tremendous advantage.
Is art kind of like a teacher to you in that, like, for example, many of us, you know, go through our days kind of like, let's say maybe worrying about things or just having a lot of thoughts in our mind. But, you know, as you're saying, you know, creativity is a lot about being free to express oneself. Maybe not, you know, to replicate something exactly, but just giving oneself the freedom to express. And did you find that when learning art, that by learning to be free in your expression in art, that translated also to your life in general, so it kind of like freed you from, you know, the kind of like routine, mundane thoughts that we tend to, you know, kind of like the challenges from day to day?
Yes. It made life much more interesting, and you look at things entirely differently, and you learn to see things as you go along more and more, observe more carefully, much more carefully. You probably listen to people more too. That's just a sideline, maybe. Hopefully you listen to what people say.
Sure. So I'm part of, I think, learning to see is, because, you know, I mean, art can be about, I guess, expressing all various emotions. And this is interesting. I want to get into this later, but, like, for example, some emotions, like, you can have art that maybe might evoke anger, or art that might evoke, you know, other negative emotions.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think most art, and I think the art that I think resonates most with other people is that kind of art that is pleasant, that really, that expresses beauty.
Yes.
So did you find that, like, in creating your art, that in addition to learning to see, you know, artistically, you know, space and light and all, that you were also learning to see beauty, and that also translated to life?
Yes, but I don't think that was my primary goal. I just created what I wanted to create, and still do. I think about the techniques more than I do about the beauty of it. The colors, the relationship of one shape to another, and somehow that's a better approach for me than just trying to make it beautiful. And I'm sure that a lot of my art is not particularly beautiful. I mean, it's creative and it's expressive, but I don't think about it being particularly beautiful.
Right, and yet it does, you know, I think that the people who buy and view your work just, it's pleasant. It makes them feel good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it has that element that really, you know, whether it's beauty, whether it's a kind of a balance, a sophistication of elements.
Well, I do think of the relationship of the different shapes and the colors to each other primarily, and I don't particularly aim for beauty, but some of them are beautiful and some of them are just very expressive. They're not always so beautiful.
But sometimes there's so much beauty in expression, so that someone might view a piece of your art and say, that is so beautiful to me.
Yes,
you know,
well,
just it's in touch with what's inside of them, I suppose.
Yes.
In the eye of the beholder.
Art is in the eye of the viewer, yes.
All right. Keith, can you slide over the camera? I can't see the clock, thanks. Sorry. All right. Happiness, happiness is the point of life. And it's the point of art. It's the point of everything we do. But like, as an artist, I think there are times when the art can actually be a challenge to happiness, when creating art, you know, even though it's supposed to be enjoyable, creates difficulties. Can you explain some of these difficulties and how an artist generally overcomes them?
Well, if you're going to express the horrors of the world, it's pretty hard to make it beautiful. And I suppose that could be a problem, but it's not going to be liked by the general public. It may be admired by some sophisticated curator, but it's not going to be liked by the general public. So in a way, it's what you're aiming for. If you want to please yourself, or whether you want to, I find that it's better to please myself. Because if I don't please myself, it's not satisfying.
So yeah, you think that, I mean, because like you teach art, so do you find that sometimes that may be one of the traps that some of your students get into, that they're actually focused more on like how others will view their work than how they, you know, really perceive their own work?
Yes. Well, we have to be careful of that and teach them just to do it for their own edification and not for what someone will think of it. However, you're right, they're eventually going to be judged by other people, so there's a little of that in it too. They do think of that. But it's a complicated thing.
Sure.
Art always often is. I mean, it often is very complicated. If you remember some of the photography that was on display down in the village at some of the galleries post 9/11, as we were talking about things that were difficult to see.
Yes.
They were still the viewing. I mean, the hordes of people going in to see. Yeah. Why they needed to connect to that somehow. Yes, yes. Some part of them wanted to still connect to the.
Well, it's part of life, and not always so beautiful, but. That's right. And you never know. Some people want that kind of thing on their walls, and other people just want something beautiful to look at.
Well, that's very fascinating to me, because I mean, let's say you have an image of like, you know, sorrow or something, an image really evoking, you know, pain or something, and a person has that on their wall. I mean, isn't that going to, even though they appreciate it, you know, like for example, there's a lot of art that's really good, but that it is painful, you know, like a lot of Shakespeare can be painful and all. So, I mean, do you find, have you ever owned, let's say, a work of art that you really admire, that you say, wow, this is brilliant, but to have it on a wall and to like experience it on a day-to-day basis, does that art become so powerful that it can actually, you know, just color one's emotions when one is, you know, experiencing it daily?
Yes, I think that kind of art is the kind of art that gets into museums, because nobody wants to have that on their wall at home. They want something more attractive to look at and not so horror-provoking. But we all do both, I think. Artists generally, I try to do, well, I think unconsciously I do both. Occasionally I do something that is relatively innocuous, so that maybe it'll sell, you know. You never know about that. That's another point. I tend to paint more for myself, really, than for what I think would be wanted in the art world, because it's impossible to know that, really. And I think it's more genuine if you do it that way. You just do it, but you yourself feel is the right thing at the right time.
Okay, so now I imagine how long has it been that you've been teaching art also?
Well, let's see, it's quite a while now. I really am not too sure. It's about 10 years, I guess.
Great, so
that I've been teaching. I started teaching at Lyric, which is Learning Retirement Center at Iona, and that was I volunteered there, and from them I have gotten some private students, and then I started teaching in my studio as well.
So what do you find is the joy of teaching art as opposed to actually creating it?
I do enjoy teaching art. Sometimes it's time-consuming and it takes away from my own work, but other than that, I like it very much. I have about 6 students, that's all I can accommodate. And there's some change, but for most of them have been with me for quite a while.
Is this a range of ages of students?
Well, yes, they tend to be a little in the older range, but because several of them have come from Lyric, which is for Learning and Retirement Center, so they're all retired people. I tried teaching children once. That was a little more difficult, and I tried that at the Mamaroneck Artists Guild, and then something happened with their space. I don't know, didn't fit the rules and regulations, so we gave it up. But I found that a little harder.
Why was that?
Because I guess just because I haven't learned that much about teaching children, and I seem to relate better to the adults.
Different set of skills for kids.
Yes, different set of skills. Although I'm sure it's very rewarding, I'm sure. The teaching is quite rewarding, particularly when one of your students gets into a great show or something.
That's pride, sure.
And they're thrilled, and it makes them very content.
And for you also, like, you know, art, if one is just creating art, I think can be very solitary. And that's all right, because if you're fully immersed in the work, then it can be joyful. But I think sometimes maybe there might be a wanting for balance. And do you find that, would you, for example, would you recommend that an artist, in addition to creating art, either be learning art or be teaching it, to kind of balance one's life out so that their life is about creating and also about other people, about relating and you know, spending time with others?
Yes, I certainly think that's a great advantage, is to be with other people. It can be very lonesome if you just stay in your studio all day and just create, and you don't get, if you're with other people, you get their ideas and lots of pleasure from them. So
you stimulate each other in the studio.
Is what?
It's stimulating to
It's stimulating to be with other people, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, because I mean, you know, for most of us, you know, other people really are our main source of happiness. And you know, this may not be particular to just art, but there are professions where a person is working solitary, like an author, and so like this idea. What?
Well, I mean, I'm alone all day. I mean, I'm not there to chat and hang out with my clients. They come in, there's a lot of, you know, work, and they leave.
Oh, right.
So I'm alone. In between, it's a long day of, you know, anyone in private practice is a solitary job.
Oh,
no one even to bounce ideas off of or anything, or just kind of get a comic relief so you can stay fresh. You have to do something. You have to find a way, stretch, or, you know, chocolate, tea, something that, you know, helps you to But it's so important, as you were saying, to have a like small community that you can hang in with while you're on the job.
Right. It's important. Like in addition to creating, to either teach or learn for the purpose of being with others, for the purpose of sharing that part of life, and I suppose also like when you're either teaching or learning, or especially teaching, do you find that the process of teaching inspires your own creativity, that you bring that into your own work?
What do I learn from my students, in other words?
In a sense,
yeah. Well, not too much, but they do. I might get an idea of something that I want to pursue, but I don't think I learn techniques or anything. Not so far,
sure.
But maybe.
Okay, happiness is our main goal in life. It's really why, what many of us aren't in touch with this. Many of us are like, seeking ambitions and, success in various areas. But really, when you think about it, it's really why we're here. So then, like, how do you think that happiness can be viewed as an art? That just like there's an art to life, there's an art to painting. So how would you think that happiness is an art?
Well, when I started at the Museum of Modern Art, and I guess it was it was a long time ago, 1960 maybe. That was pretty much what it was. You just created, and just the art of expressing yourself made you happier. And it didn't matter well, for instance, in the first class I was in, I had never studied, but I was surrounded by I had never studied officially. I'd always done artwork in school. In fact, I had sold one at the very young age to a textile company.
Wow.
Because I went to a school that emphasized coordinated programs. And I combined music with art, and they loved that. It was a wood block made up of musical notations. I remember it very distinctly because I had 3/4 time in there, and the first time I did it, I did not do it backwards. I mean, so I had to do the whole thing over again. I never forgot that because it came out the wrong way, of course. You have to do it backwards, so when you print it, it comes out 3/4. It was back. It was
never made that mistake.
Backwards. I never made that mistake again. And but they loved it because I was coordinating music and art. I went to a wonderful school called Horace Mann, and they just loved that kind of thing. It's not in existence anymore. It's not the boys' school, or maybe it's co-ed by now, but it's not the same school. It was an experimental school connected with Columbia. Mm-hmm. So that was wonderful. I did that a little bit through the years, but now I lost my trend of thought. This was, yeah.
Well, as a visual artist,
I do that all the time, all the time. And schools and art. I mean, it's something that we definitely need to keep putting money into. But that form of expression is so important to students, and I just find that those programs suffer first. Art, music.
They do now. Well, this was wonderful. I went. They had a wonderful teacher there, and in fact, I think that's one reason that in later years I did continue. I came back to it more or less.
Right.
So, but you asked another question that I don't think I answered.
Well, yeah. Let me. As a visual artist, just understanding art as you do, and being so successful at it, what advice could you give our viewers, in general, about applying what you learn in art to like the art of happiness, to the art of enjoying life?
Well, it certainly does produce happiness. When I'm painting, I'm always very absorbed. You're absorbed in your artwork, and you don't think of anything else. What you have to do tomorrow, or what you did yesterday, or anything that bothers you will disappear.
So in a sense, I'm sorry.
In a sense, it's almost like it can be therapy.
Absolutely.
I had quite a tragedy in my life, and I think about 5 or 6 years afterwards, I did turn to to art, and I've loved it ever since. And it's been very satisfying,
Yeah,
particularly if you're successful. Occasionally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, so basically you're saying like the art kind of like, you know, there's so much concentration, so much focus involved. That kind of, I think maybe that kind of maybe trains your mind to really like think and feel the kind of thoughts that you want to feel. You know, that process really, you know, serves as a training ground for that. So I think we could use that, because a lot of times we're going through our days and, you know, we don't have that opportunity for focus, for concentration, for really honing in. And when you develop that, you know, as we go through our days, we could use that to really just to learn how to just like stay focused on the positive, to stay focused on our feelings rather than on just like events that are going on and all.
Like disciplining yourself.
Exactly.
It is, yes. I noticed that I had an experience recently where someone said something to me and I repeated it, and she didn't express the meaning that she wanted to express at all. When I repeated it, then she noticed that she had to explain what she really meant, so that you become more observant too. You see everything. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good. But in nature, you see more beauty and more detail. But you can carry it over into personal relationships, because you notice more things about people.
Great. Okay, we have about a minute left. Before we end, can you give like how can our viewers like get in touch with your work? Like how can they get in touch with you? Or
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Where can they go to see some of your work?
Oh, well, you can always come to my studio, and then I have it at the Mamaroneck Artists Guild in Larchmont. It's called the Mamaroneck Artists Guild, but it's in Larchmont. And in my studio, of course, I'm happy to show it at any time. And up at Silvermine, I'm a member of Silvermine up in Connecticut, which is a very old art center, and they have a sample of my work up there, but they have slides mostly. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Louise. This has been wonderful, and hopefully we can apply, you know, what we learn in art to just life in general.
That's right. Yes, it is an art of living.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. This is George and Claudia and Louise saying, be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you join us again next time here on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful, it's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny, so let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.